Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to picture this. The year is 2024. You are a highly successful manufacturer, and you've just landed this absolute whale of a deal with a distributor over in Germany. Two massive 40-foot containers, completely packed with your premium polyurethane products, leave the port, headed straight for Europe. And, everything seems absolutely perfect. But the moment those containers hit the port of Hamburg, German customs steps in. They hold up their hands and ask for two specific pieces of paper: a REACH SVHC test report and an Annex 17 compliance document. And, well, you don't have them. Just like that, your perfect, highly profitable export deal turns into a literal nightmare.
Because of that one missing piece of paperwork, those containers are stuck at the port. And they just sit there. And every single day they sit, the meter is ticking. The manufacturer in this very real, terrifying story actually racked up a staggering 14,500 euros in container storage and warehouse fees alone. I mean, that is pure, unrecoverable lost profit, just bleeding out day by day while they scrambled to figure out what on earth went wrong.
And honestly, this nightmare scenario illustrates exactly what happens when compliance is treated as a total afterthought. Those containers were held hostage at customs for 23 agonizing days. Ultimately, the manufacturer was forced to undergo emergency lab testing right there in Germany at triple the normal cost. And the worst part? A huge portion of that shipment actually had to be packed up and re-exported all the way back to Asia.
So what does this all mean? Well, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. An incredible $180,000 order was completely derailed. And the subsequent orders from that big buyer? Canceled. Just totally gone. When we talk about chemical regulations like REACH and Proposition 65, we aren't just talking about crossing T's and dotting I's for some random bureaucrat. We're talking about a strict financial imperative. This is literally about protecting your bottom line and your global reputation.
So to make sure that never happens to you, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be going through the container risk, what REACH and Prop 65 actually are, the reactive mistake you need to avoid, the chemical management system, and we'll wrap up with the 7-step compliance path. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The Container Risk, or as it's known in Vietnamese, Rủi ro container.
You know the horror story I just told you? It isn't some isolated, one-off incident. In the 2024 to 2025 period alone, trade associations actually recorded over 200 similar cases of shipments from Asian exporters being flagged, held up, or just outright rejected at Western borders. Whether you're exporting plastics, textiles, footwear, or, furniture, your container is a massive liability if you cannot prove compliance up front. Customs officials at major hubs like Hamburg, Rotterdam, and Long Beach out in California are actively sampling shipments. And a failure doesn't just mean tens of thousands of dollars in hidden processing fees. No way. It means risking your relationships with major retailers like IKEA, Walmart, and Target. They will hit you with heavy chargebacks or simply blacklist you globally as a high-risk supplier.
Which brings us to Section 2. What exactly are REACH and Prop 65?
If you want to avoid that global blacklist, you really need to understand the rules of the game. First up is REACH. This is the European Union's extraordinarily strict chemical management framework. And here is the absolute most important thing you need to grasp today. REACH doesn't just apply to literal barrels of raw chemicals. It applies to the chemicals embedded within your finished products, what the EU officially calls articles. So even if you're just selling a finished office chair or a nice waterproof jacket, you are legally obligated to comply with REACH if that product enters the EU market.
Now, notice how REACH is actually structured into distinct control mechanisms. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. First, you have Annex 17. Think of this as a hard, fast, do not exceed list. It's got over 70 banned or strictly limited substances, like you have to keep cadmium under 0.01%, for example. Then you have the SVHC list, substances of very high concern. Now, this one isn't an outright ban, but it's a mandatory disclosure requirement. If a chemical on this list makes up more than 0.1% of your product's total weight, you have to disclose it to your business buyers within 45 days. Add to this the emerging really stringent bans on forever chemicals like PFAS, and you can quickly see why staying completely updated is absolutely critical.
Okay, let's cross the Atlantic over to the United States, specifically California Proposition 65. So this is a state law that requires really clear consumer warnings on products containing any of roughly 900 chemicals known to cause cancer or reproductive harm. And hey, don't think you can just ignore this because you only sell to other US states. If your product hits a giant retailer's distribution center or Amazon Vendor Central, it is almost certainly going to enter the California market, which makes this compliance completely 100% mandatory. This actually highlights a fundamental philosophical difference between these two massive markets. On the left side, the EU's REACH focuses heavily on banning or strictly limiting hazardous substances. Basically, they want the bad chemicals out of the product entirely. But on the right side, California's Proposition 65 is primarily a disclosure law. It doesn't necessarily ban the chemical outright. Instead, it dictates that you must warn the consumer about it with highly specific labels, so they can make an informed choice themselves.
But listen to this. If you fail to provide that specific warning label in California, the financial penalties are just brutal. Because Prop 65 allows for a private right of action. Literally any citizen or specialized lawyer in California can sue you for non-compliance. Over the last couple of years, the average settlement cost for a Prop 65 lawsuit ran between $60,000 and $150,000 per case. I mean, that is a massive, crushing hit for any exporter, and it's often driven up even further by the plaintiff's attorney fees.
All right, moving to Section 3, the reactive mistake.
So you might be wondering, how do most manufacturers actually handle these terrifying risks? Well, unfortunately, they usually do it through a fatal flaw in their process. Most factories treat compliance like a surprise pop quiz. They only test a product when a buyer explicitly demands it. They finally get the certificate, shove it in a drawer somewhere, and just completely forget about it. This means every single time they launch a new product, they are starting from zero. Even worse, the EU updates that SVHC list every 6 months. So if you're using this outdated drawer method, you are entirely blind to those updates, putting yourself at massive risk of accidentally selling a non-compliant product. And when a supply chain auditor eventually shows up, you have absolutely zero proof of systemic due diligence.
Section 4, Chemical Management System.
So what's the fix? Well, the only way to survive and really thrive in this regulatory environment is to shift from a reactive scramble to a proactive framework. We call this a chemical management system, or CMS. And the best part? Implementing a CMS doesn't mean you're starting from scratch. It actually maps beautifully onto the ISO standards your factory probably already uses every day. Under ISO 14001 for environmental management, REACH and Prop 65 just become direct compliance obligations. Under ISO 45001 for health and safety, you track those exact same dangerous chemicals to protect your own workers. And under ISO 9001 for quality management, you evaluate your supplier's ability to deliver clean materials. It is just an incredibly elegant, integrated approach.
A truly robust chemical management system is built on 6 core pillars. Let's run through them really quick. First, your chemical inventory. This is your single source of truth for everything coming in. Second, you conduct product compliance assessments, basically cross-referencing your bill of materials against those regulatory limits. Third, you've got to digitize and track all your testing records. Fourth is ensuring supplier compliance by auditing them annually. Fifth is change management. And finally, number 6, regulatory watch, continuously monitoring agencies like ECHA for any new updates.
Actually, I want to pause on pillar number 5 for a second, change management. Because statistically, a staggering 80% of compliance failures happen simply because a factory decided to change a material, swap a supplier, or tweak a formula without running it through a compliance check first. 80%. Uncontrolled change is literally the enemy of compliance.
Finally, Section 5, the 7-step compliance path.
Now, implementing all this might sound a bit daunting, but expert partners like ISC Global and Staunch utilize a brilliantly simplified consulting pathway that prevents the costly mistakes of trying to go it alone. It starts with a precise gap analysis so you don't overtest and waste money. Step 2 is absolutely crucial: expert guidance on proper sample preparation. This step alone prevents the 30% lab rejection rate that's super common when manufacturers prep samples incorrectly. Then comes testing at an accredited facility, reviewing those reports, issuing bilingual verification certificates, and finally, continuous monitoring to keep you updated. It completely transforms a complex legal burden into a smooth, streamlined operational process.
And why does this all matter to you? Because proactive compliance isn't just some sunk cost, it is a massive competitive advantage. It acts as an incredibly cheap insurance policy, usually costing just a tiny fraction of a single % of a container's total value. But beyond just mitigating risk, having this verification empowers you to command premium pricing. We're talking quoting 8 to 15% higher than your non-compliant competitors, all because you're offering buyers absolute peace of mind. And most importantly, it unlocks vendor onboarding. Without it, the doors to giants like IKEA, Decathlon, and Amazon remain firmly shut.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought.
take a really close look at your current operations. If an auditor from a major European or US retailer walked onto your factory floor today and asked for your chemical compliance documentation, what would you hand them? Are you relying on that outdated drawer method, just hoping for the best? Or is your product truly, systemically ready for the global market? You know, it might just be time to stop reacting and start taking full control of your compliance journey.